Hi everyone, thanks again for voting on the poll on the Commercial Law Applicants LinkedIn group. As promised, here is a video on articulating your skills, strengths and competencies from your range of past experiences. So to start off with, the point I really want to make is any experience can be relevant. It doesn't need to directly relate to whatever career it is you're going for, as long as you can draw out the transferable skills and demonstrate how those skills will make you an ideal candidate. Since the age of sort of 15, 16, I've worked on a building site, I've worked in catering, I worked as a trolley boy at a supermarket, I worked as a drum kit teacher for over a decade. And what I've realised is all of those roles were very relevant, and I did talk about them quite openly in my interview. Roles like that can show interpersonal skills, professionalism, experiences with clients, work ethic, commitment, the list goes on. If you've worked in a service role, for example, maybe in a bar or in a retail store or on the checkouts of a supermarket, that shows client-facing skills. I mean, client is just another word for customer. So if you've had to represent a business or a brand in front of customers in those kinds of contexts, again, they may be experiences that are worth talking about. So thinking about your experiences in more detail, what I used to do, I used to have a version of my CV where I footnoted each experience. And in my own time, when I wasn't under the kind of pressure you experience during interviews, I would write down as much as I could possibly remember about all those experiences and my specific roles. For example, if you were captain of the netball team, you might write down in that kind of footnoted section of your CV that your role included securing sponsorship, negotiating the price of kit, arranging training sessions, collaborating with other netball societies around the country to arrange tournaments or matches. Maybe you were responsible for organising transport to games or motivating teammates. If you think about it in that kind of detail, actually there are a huge number of skills you could then draw out of each element of that role. If you worked on a group project at university, your role might have involved in-depth research or producing some kind of comprehensive, consolidated report. You had to work closely with team members to pursue a common goal. Maybe you were working under pressure if the deadline was particularly tight, or you had to think creatively in the way you presented what you were doing. So again, you might have worked in a group at university, and if you really take the time to think about it, there are so many useful elements you could probably draw out of your role. And to give another example, if you've tutored younger students, it might have required you to frequently take complex concepts and relay them in a simple, easily digestible manner. If you're mentoring younger students, maybe you had to motivate them and really try to keep them engaged. If you were debating and mooting, that involves trying to persuade people to come around to your way of thinking, which in a way is a type of negotiation. It shows a lot of commitment because instead of using your free time to watch Netflix or whatever you decide to do, you were really working at developing your public speaking skills and your research skills, and the list like that goes on. So hopefully you start thinking about your experiences in a different way and get used to kind of drawing out those different parallels. I used to be in a band full time before I went to university and then went along the kind of city law route. And I used to draw an analogy between being in and running a band and running a business, because ultimately we were creating a product. It was the music. We were branding that product, our logo, the way our setup was on stage, the CD artwork, all that kind of stuff. We were marketing that product through, at the time, MySpace or social media. We were touring to try and help sell more CDs, in the same way that a business will try and market their product to increase sales. We had to keep track of budgets, we had to organise ourselves effectively, and all of those parallels went down really well in an interview because it showed that I kind of understood, at least in a foundational sense, what a business does. So once you've thought about your experiences and you've really thought about all the different elements you can talk about, then you should start to think about the skills, the competencies and strengths that are most relevant to the employer that you're applying to. You should do some research and see how those employers define specific skills or see whether they really focus on skills. But they might include things like communication, networking, commitment, motivation, analytical and research skills, problem solving, organization, adaptability, flexibility, professionalism, commercial awareness, international mindset. team working. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and there is a lot of overlap between what different firms are looking for. But make sure if a firm lists out, say, 10 key skills on the website, that you tick off each of those skills at some point across your application form. I mean, ultimately, firms will want to know that your interests, experiences, competency, skills, and all of that kind of thing make you a suitable candidate for the role. So it's worth really putting in the time to do your research and to really think about your previous experiences and what you gained. Once you've kind of figured out which skills you've gained and you've got all the detail about your role, then you need to think about effectively structuring your answers to application questions and interview questions. Now, a mistake that I see very commonly is students will list out a whole range of experiences and then separately list out a whole range of skills, which means you're kind of expecting a grad recruiter to unpick everything you've said and figure out, maybe if you say you've got team working ability, did that team working come from the first experience you talked about? And if so, how? Or maybe it was the second one. Make their life easier, make it really clear. So start by giving as much context as you can. Say, whilst I was X position at X organization or society, my role involved ABC. Doesn't take up too many words on an application form, it doesn't take up too many seconds in an interview, but if you explain the context and what you did, then when you start to talk about skills, it will come across as far more authentic. So I could have said, I was the president of the Commercial Law Society at university. My role involved helping to promote employer events, helping to promote social events, negotiating sponsorship, motivating team members, all that kind of stuff. And then I would talk about the skills and be like, as a result, I developed leadership skills and negotiating skills. I showed commitment, I showed work ethic and ambition. I had to think creatively when marketing events. And I think by drawing those two elements together, it made my answer seem a lot more genuine and a lot more credible. So with that in mind, there are certain words you might want to use when you're talking about your experience or your role. Saying things like, I was elected into the role, or I was selected or invited to take part in a certain experience, shows that you were chosen, maybe above other people, which adds just that extra element of credibility to what you're doing. So to sum up, think in detail about your experiences, maybe write down as much as you can so it remains in the forefront of your mind. Do your research and figure out what skills firms are looking for, and then find out how you can map those skills to all the different elements of your roles. And then when you are structuring your answers, make sure you make it as clear as possible to the grad recruiter how your experience in your role led to a specific competency or strength and why that makes you a suitable candidate. Hopefully that was helpful. If you've got any questions, please stick them in the comments, and I'll be back with another video shortly.